believe that it starts at the local level, and activists like us, many of the coalition members are here, are very worried and concerned about the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act. I understand that, of course, right now you are very much consumed with issues with the shooter and things like that, and very busy. But again, our constitutional rights really can't wait. We've been urged by representatives by the commissioners to talk to our congressmen and our senators. And of course, we've met them on occasion and brought these issues up. However, as you may feel as well, we do not have the same type of pull as citizens that our commissioners do. So we want to work with our commissioners at the local level, and that's why we've started coalitions in 5 different counties to build, to pass what we call the RCGR, or the Restoring Constitutional Governance Resolution, which has also been passed in 6 different counties and states, cities in the United States. Just for the public record, I want to mention that the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, is by far the most racist, bigoted, prejudiced law in the history of the United States. It allows the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens without due process, and totally ravages their 5th and 6th Amendment rights, including the First Amendment rights that I'll get into just briefly. My presentation will be quite short. This type of law was used to racistly, by race, imprison Asian Americans in World War II simply because of their race. And this type of law, which is of course connected to the AUMF, or the Authorization of Use of Military Force, was again used to racially profile Arab Americans after 9/11 and imprison dozens of Arab Americans simply because of their race. And that's why I call it a racist law. Has been used for racial purposes. And the U.S. citizens have a right, of course, according to the 5th and 6th Amendment, which I will read. The 5th says that no person shall be held to answer for a capital, otherwise infamous crime, unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. And the 6th Amendment states, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy a right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. The NDAA, particularly Section 1021(2), states that a person who was a part or substantially supported Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces that are engaged in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners, including any person who has committed a belligerent act or has directly supported such hostilities in aid of enemy forces, disposition under the law of war, detention under the law of war without trial until the end of hostilities authorized by the Authorization of Use of Military Force. The end of hostilities means forever, because this is a war on terror, and you can't have a war on terror, does not end because it's a war on a verb. And so Judge Kathleen Forrest, when the Obama administration was sued by different activists and journalists, in her case, she asked the question to the federal government: can Hedges, who is a New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and others be detained for contacting Al-Qaeda or the Taliban as reporters? She asked at the hearing. She also said that she worried that the government's reluctance at the March hearing to specify whether examples of the plaintiff's activities, such as aiding an anti-secrecy website, WikiLeaks in the case of Brigitte Jones-Dottir, a member of Parliament in Iceland, would fall under the scope of the provision. The federal government chose to take no comment on that issue and chose not to say anything in regards to those questions that the federal judge asked. She said, she ruled failure to be able to make such a representation requires the court to assume that in fact the government takes the position that a wide swath of expressive and associational conduct is in fact encompassed by the 1021 NDAA. She went on to further rule: First Amendment rights are guaranteed by the Constitution and cannot be legislated away. This court rejects the government's suggestion that American citizens can be placed in military detention indefinitely for acts they could not predict might subject them to detention. In Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court ruled all laws which are repugnant to the Constitution are null and void. Miranda versus Arizona, the Supreme Court ruled where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rule making or which would abrogate them. Norton v. Shelby County, the Supreme Court ruled, an unconstitutional act is not law. It confers no rights. It imposes no duties, affords no protection. It creates no office. It is in legal contemplation as inoperative as though it had never been passed. American Jurisprudence, Book 16, Section 256 states, the general rule is that a unconstitutional statute, whether federal or state, though having a form and name of law, is in reality no law, but is wholly void and ineffective for any purpose, since unconstitutionality dates from the enactment and not merely from the date of the decision so bringing it. An unconstitutional law is in legal contemplation is as inoperative as if it was never been passed. We're simply asking that the commissioners sign the Restoring Constitutional Governance Resolution, which has already been passed in Albany, New York, October 7, 2013, already been passed in Oxford, Massachusetts, October 9, 2013, Webster, Massachusetts, October 21st, 2013, has already been passed in Emmett, Idaho, December 17, 2013, Gem County, Idaho, February 24th, 2014, Middleton, Idaho, March 19, 2014. And just for the public record, I'd like to read briefly the Restoring Constitutional Governance Resolution, which simply states, whereas Pike County is not a battlefield subject to the laws of war, and whereas Federal Judge Catherine Forrest has ruled, Section 1021 of the 2012 NDAA is unconstitutional, and whereas the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that neither Congress nor the President can constitutionally authorize the detention and or disposition of any person in the United States or citizen of the United States under the laws of war who is not serving in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. And whereas for the purpose of this resolution, the terms arrest, capture, detention under the law of war, disposition under the law of war, and law of war are used in the same sense and shall have the same meaning as such terms have in the 2012 NDAA Section 1021. And therefore be it resolved that notwithstanding any treaty, federal, state, or local law or authority enacted or claimed, including but not limited to an authorization for use of military force, National Defense Authorization Act, or any similar law or authority enacted or claimed by Congress or the office of the President directed at any person in Pike County who is not serving in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger, it is unconstitutional and therefore unlawful for any person to arrest or capture any person in Pike County or citizen of Pike County within the United States with the intent of detention under the law of war, or actually subject a person in Pike County to disposition under the law of war, or subject any person to targeted killing in Pike County or citizen of Pike County within the United States, and be it further resolved that Pike County requests the Pennsylvania State Legislature recognize the duty of the state of Pennsylvania to interpose itself between unconstitutional usurpations by the federal government or its agents and the people of this state, as well as the duty to defend the unalienable natural rights of the people, all of which is consistent with our oaths to defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Pennsylvania against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and be it further resolved that Pike County requests our congressional delegation commence immediately with efforts to repeal the unconstitutional sections of the 2012 NDAA, to wit sections 1021 and 1022, and any other section or provision which will have the same or substantially the same effect on any person in the United States not serving in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger, and be it finally resolved that Pike County requests our congressional delegation to introduce, support, and secure the passage of legislation which clearly states that Congress not only does not authorize, but in fact prohibits the use of military force, military detention, military trial, extraordinary rendition or torture, or any other power of the law of war against any person in the United States not serving in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. I want to remind you of the oath that you publicly took as the commissioners of Pike County, whom we do respect and whom we believe can change the history of Pike County. You stated in your sworn oath, I do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the Commonwealth, and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. We've sent all of you the information over a month ago, all of the different types of video and informational things regarding this issue. And I don't know why we would not support the restoring constitutional governance resolution. Other cities have already done it, other counties have already done it. And really, if we don't support the RCGR, we're tacitly aiding and protecting an extension of a law that was used by the AUMF in 2001 to racistly detain Arab Americans. It's totally based on race. And it not only is racistly biased, it is also, xenophobic, it is intolerant, it is unconstitutional. And so at the very most, we have a duty, is my view, to block this type of racist law. I pray that the commissioners will be the heroes of Pike County, that you will leave a legacy here, that you stand for the Constitution, that you upheld your oath, and that you block any type of federal usurpations that infringe on the U.S. citizens of Pike County and their constitutional rights. It is my sincere hope that we can pass the RCGR here in Pike County and allow that to spread so that we can send a clear message to, like you said, Harrisburg, to the people upstairs, that Pike County starts and stands for the U.S. Constitution, that we put our money where our mouth is, and we sign the law, the Restoring Constitutional Governance Resolution, which simply states that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land in Pike County, and that the laws of war do not apply in Pike County, and that this is not a battleground for the laws of war to apply. I really thank you, Commissioners, for allowing me to speak this day. I hope Mr. Wagner was here. I really wanted to address him personally today. I know I've addressed both of you, and I know, Rich, I've worn your ear off many times, so I appreciate your patience and appreciate your concern listening to me today. Thank you.
I can tell you were a pastor because I'm out of breath and I didn't know. These are the documents that the mayor gave us, correct?
Yes.
And they still sit on my desk at home. I do not discard them. I take that very serious. I think that I want to read them again. I realize you just read them to us. We're not illiterate. We heard you loud and clear. I don't think there's any variance whatsoever in our commitment to our oath of office. I've taken that oath under a lot of different titles, believe me, and I take it serious. And I know my peers do as well. This is something new to us. We've never really got on a national stage with issues. All right? We never really deal with anything like that. We deal at the local level. But it's something they certainly support all the constitutional rights and freedoms. And those of us that had the opportunity to serve this country under uniform understand how precious they are. So I want to also give our solicitor here an opportunity to review. Mr. Wagner needs an opportunity. And thank you for your presentation and your commitment to the Constitution. Yes, sir.
When you said it's not dealing with national issues and local issues, I just want to comment. That's exactly what I'm hoping for, is that the people that are elected or entrusted closest to where I live and where I work take my rights and the dignity and the privileges that this country gave us, and like you certainly.
I'm going to just correct you. Yeah, this country didn't give you anything.
No.
Almighty God gave you your rights. That's
right.
Here. Veterans are the ones that
right.
And
like you, I served as well.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine. Please, anytime you want to speak about God, go right ahead. We need him all the time. But the thing is, what we really are hoping is that our local officials stand up and say, listen, we don't care who you are, whether you are the federal government or whether you are not. These are the things that we are here to protect for our people. We're really not asking you to get into national levels. We are asking you to stand up for what God did give the people in your county and defend them and say, we are not a battlefield. You cannot impose the laws of war upon us, and we don't care who you are.
I didn't get your name, sir.
Robert Piquel.
Welcome aboard. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Yes, ma'am.
If I may.
Yes, ma'am.
I recently moved here from New York just because some of the things that were going on there just were incongruent with my beliefs and my rights, so.
Well, welcome to Pike County, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. You have no idea. But the thing is, there's a lot of young people here, y'all don't remember, but I can't forget, there was a time in our history, not too long ago, when, as a people, you could have been taken out of your home in the middle of the night, without due process, your Fourth Amendment rights, your First Amendment, who you associated with, who you talked to, when you spoke up. You could have been penalized for that just by virtue of the fact that you were considered less than human. So your dignity, your humanity was negated by a local authority back in the day. And
that was also supported by the United States Supreme Court, ma'am.
Exactly. And, a lot of, since Dred Scott, all those things that went down. And, later on, the federal government did wise up and say, okay, well, you can't suppress a certain population simply because by virtue of a genetic quality. Now, you fast forward a few decades, and we're looking at a federal government with an overreach that's doing the same thing by virtue of the fact that by fiat, they can come into your home, they can say, by association, by your attitude, by your speech, by your locale, by your race, by whatever they feel like, by executive order, you can be detained without due process, your rights are completely rescinded, and your dignity and humanity is totally gone. And local governments now are the ones we're looking to stop all that, not let that happen.
A certain
So
quote
it's a
from
human
Thomas-
rights issue for me, not just.
A certain quote from Thomas Jefferson comes to my mind. When injustice becomes the law, resistance becomes duty. I didn't get your name, ma'am.
Lisa Ellingson. And I just
Okay,
wanted,
I just put it together.
yeah. This is my main man and number one. But I just wanted to say, just for the sake of the future, because we're parents and we're about to be grandparents someday, and we're looking at the situation where if our children want to speak up on something they feel passionate about, an issue or a cause, that they shouldn't have the fear of being, simply by virtue of their God gave them the rights to say what they say and to do what they do and go where they want and associate with whom they please, that no government of man should ever come into that situation and try to stop that.
I appreciate your comments very
Thank you.
much.
I'm sorry. Thank you for your
And we're not treating this frivolously at all.
I
Sure.
believe that.
I can't say that I disagree with anything that I've heard so far, because I agree for my nation as well, because I feel our rights are being trampled constantly. And we all feel that way. And I look at this as a bottom-up approach, because the people at the top simply aren't listening to us.
Here,
We're
here.
here.
That's right.
Yes, sir, I'll be right with you all. I want to read it again. I'm going to ask my peers to read it. I'm going to ask the solicitor to read it. I'm not going to make any false promises, but let us take it under sincere advisement, please. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to make a few comments too, and I know that in a family situation, it's always, or not always, but it's often good to let the wife have the last words, right? But actually, this is a unique situation, so I'm going to step on that and make a few comments as well.
It's okay,
Yeah.
dear.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I first heard about this in maybe July or August when Pastor Moon told us about this NDAA Act and invited Dan Johnson, the founder of the NDAA, and the men that put together a lot of this. And so I listened to from PANDA, the PANDA, People Against NDAA. So I listened to the presentation, and I found it very concerning, but then, time passed. And a month or so ago, I did take a real close look at it myself, and that's what I wanted to share about. And I think you will. And I know I sense I'm really speaking to the choir in a sense, but I just want to share my own experience. What happened when I took a close look at the wording, the verbiage of this NDAA section 1021. As Sean mentioned, there's some very frightening language in there. And when I read it, I'm not going to reread it again, but I'll touch on the main points, the main phrases of this act. And the first phrase, and these phrases are all three triggers, actually. They're triggers that allow the government to use military force. And the first trigger is anybody that's a part of Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. Okay, that's good. But the second one, the second phrase is any person that's committed a belligerent act. That phrase, that wordage in there stands alone. Any person that's committed, and then the third phrase is anyone that directly supports hostilities or is an enemy against the United States. And that maybe that's okay too, but that second one, any person that has committed a belligerent act. And as I thought about that, immediately, the first person that came to mind was Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which we're all Solzhenitsyn, we're familiar with what happened under Stalinist Russia. He, wrote about the truth about what was happening in Stalinist Russia under that regime. He spoke about it, he wrote about it. He was picked up in the middle, as we all know, picked up in the middle of the night and given a trial, found guilty of being an enemy of the state, and sent off to Siberia. So, but there's another person that came to mind right away, actually. We all know about Solzhenitsyn. Many people in this room may not be aware of the second person I want to mention. And you all know Sean and Justin Moon. Well, you might not be aware that his mom and dad are both from North Korea. They were born in North Korea. Well, in 1948, his dad was a minister in Pyongyang. 48, that was 3 years after Kim Il-sung was established as the dictator of this communist country. So he had a very active and outspoken ministry in Pyongyang. Well, he was also picked up in the middle of the night, or I don't know if it was the middle of the night, but picked up off the streets. And in his case, he was tortured for 3 months in a city jail. And then after that, then they gave him a trial. And they found him guilty of this crime against the state. And in that case, they said he was guilty of disturbing the social order. Right? And he was found guilty of that. So then he was sent for 5 years in a labor death camp where he would have probably died. But he was freed in the Korean War, when MacArthur landed at Incheon in 1950. So after 2 years, he was liberated. So we're familiar with that kind of thing because that happens in banana republics. It happens in totalitarian countries where they don't have what we have as the protections of the Constitution, the First Amendment, and all of the amendments and the topics that have, and we take it for granted because for 230 years, as American citizens, we've known that those protections are in place. But as of 2012, and you'll see this as you look at this literature, in 2012, now the federal government has a tool to suspend those rights against anyone, and they don't have to provide any proof. They don't have to provide any proof. All they have to do is they have to allege. They have to allege. And if they allege that you're an enemy or a terrorist, they could say, or a belligerent, if they use their own language, and that word belligerent act I'm sure is in there for a reason. People that wrote that, I'm sure this wasn't scribbled out in a bar napkin on K Street. Legal minds put this language in there for a purpose that it can be used.
Apply to General Washington then.
Yeah.
That's right.
Amen. So anyways, when I started looking at it closely myself, these things were really alarming to me, especially the language in that section 2. Those are triggers, and they don't belong in the United States of America.
Here, here.
That's right.
The other thing I'd say is, personally, I have approached this subject with your depth of analysis with Congressman Marino. I was dissatisfied. I've known about this, not your organization, but I've known about that act previous because I read a little bit. Yes, Tom.
Commissioners, I'd like to praise Reverend Moon for bringing this up. I think this is a very timely subject to the Commissioners meeting. I'd also like to say that Patriot Connectors, you guys have a lot of it, made our meetings up there in the high school, is trying to get Dan Johnson as one of our speakers in the future. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do that, but we'll keep the commissioners abreast of that, and hopefully we can get it out there when we have that meeting for Dan Johnson, who is the leader of the vocational group. So I just wanted to bring that to attention as well. Thanks, Commissioner.
Any other advisement? Any other?
When can we hear from you?
when I tell you. Let me explain something, Mayor. I'm not a shy person when my mind's made up about something. But before I cut, I measure twice. Right?
Good.
So, just be patient with me. I know you, yes, sir.
On a more mundane subject, beginning of the agenda, there was a salary board that I didn't see on my agenda. Included payments to the Hay Group.
Yes.
Retirement board. Retirement board. Thank you.